wanted to start the interview by saying congratulations on the work that you've done so far on the game, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about where Below the Stone first came from. Like, when did you guys first come up with the idea, and when did you first start working on the game?
Yeah, it's kind of a funny story. It was something where Below the Stone basically started as, it didn't even start as a GDD, where typically you see a lot of indie games, they'll start with, all this documentation and, okay, we need to set up these rules and this is our gameplay mantra and all that. And really, Below the Stone started as like an art design. It was something where I was making almost like these pretend screenshots for different games. I was just using my art and trying to make some assets for a game that didn't exist yet. And that game was Below the Stone. And I went to our lead programmer, Andrew, who I knew was interested in procedural generation and Dwarf Fortress. So he was really the perfect match for somebody who'd be interested in this game, and asked him, would you be interested in making Below the Stone? And he was on board almost right away. So that's kind of how we began work on Below the Stone. Of course, later on, we ended up doing a Kickstarter, and we needed some music for the trailer. So we were looking for contacts for a musician or a composer. And what ended up happening was, when we sent out some lines to see what kind of composers were out there, we always ended up getting messages like, your typical, here's my portfolio, here's my contacts, I hope you contact me. And for any composers who are listening, Carrol was the only one who, Carrol, the guy we went with, was the only one who actually asked about the game first. He didn't ask about a rate or what I'm being paid or here's my portfolio. He started with asking what the game was about. And from there, we realized he was the best fit for this project. And that's how we met Carrol. And I don't know if you want to ask later about how we met Apogee. Do you want to make that like a separate question or?
Yeah. I was going to ask that down the track, but yeah, if you want to elaborate on it now, go for it. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, what ended up happening was we had a Kickstarter, and really, a lot of people would think that if you ran a Kickstarter and you didn't make your funding, that it would be a failure. For Below the Stone, it had to be the opposite of that. I wouldn't call gaining hundreds of new fans, getting the attention of a publisher like Apogee and many other publishers that ended up spamming us in our inbox, I would not call that a failure. So we turned a what a lot of people might look at as a failure into this massive success. And of course, we wouldn't be in a call right now with Apogee, Scott Miller of Apogee right now, had that Kickstarter not happened. So really, it turned out to be a huge success. It was something that, I have no regrets doing.
Mike, was there a reason why you went to Kickstarter in the first place? Like, I know here in Australia that when Kickstarter first started up with musicians and filmmakers, it was kind of almost frowned upon, but then it gradually became the norm, and now it's the way a lot of indie filmmakers, a lot of indie game makers and musicians start out. What was that about Kickstarter that made you decide that was the way to go in the first place?
Well, it was kind of twofold. Well, of course we needed funding for a project like this. Making a game is an expensive task. It's not done. I mean, for a lot of people, it's a labor of love. But at the same time, you gotta, put food on the table. So Kickstarter was about funding, but also it was about trying to meet new people as well. That was really our first exposure into the public doing a Kickstarter. We had a small Twitter, we had a small Discord, but the moment we did Kickstarter, we watched our Twitter, we watched our social media, our Discord suddenly leap from the ground into this like explosive community that's only grown until today.
And Scott, what was it that made you decide that you wanted to get involved with Below the Stone? What was it that made this game stand out for you?
Well, I mean, we had just decided to sort of relaunch Apogee, and we were desperate for games, so we were looking for anything we could take, really. So That's how we do. No, seriously. Actually, Below the Stone really captured my interest because it reminds me a lot of my very first game, the game that really launched Apogee back in 1987 or so, called Kingdom Across, where you're this intrepid explorer. It's all done in text though, across, and but you're this intrepid explorer, and you're going down through these levels of dungeons, and there's puzzles and traps and enemies and everything. And this game was like, I've always wanted to kind of do a more modern remake of Cross, and boom, come across this game, and there's a lot of similarities, but also a lot of differences. This is this is very much a rogue-based game, but it has a pretty key difference in that like in most rogue games, you go down, and when you die, that's it. In this game, you can actually return to the top level, which is sort of the kingdom level, which is a safe level. It's a safe harbor. Lots of craftsmen and blacksmiths and quest givers up there, and people who are going to further the story for you. So you can go up there and do things, or reorganize yourself, make craft things, whatever, store some secret things that you may not want to lose on your next trip down. And then when you go back down into the dungeon, it actually regenerates itself. So that's the trade-off. When you do go to the surface, yeah, it's safe, and you can do some things, but when you go back down, it's reorganized itself. It's it's all procedurally randomly generated under certain rules. So that was a really cool twist on the whole thing. And they've got all the crafting. I just really love games that have like RPG elements, crafting, lots of systems, gameplay systems that kind of intertwine together and so on. So this game kind of checked off a lot of the boxes we were looking for. The team just was full of passion. After we talked to them, we really felt that. So I think this was the first project we signed. We're super happy with the progress so far.
Scott, I guess another question I'd love to ask you is about the relaunch for Apogee. How did that come about? But also, coming back this time, has it changed how you discover new games now? Like we were talking to Mike about Kickstarter. Has that changed over your journey on how you now discover new games that you want to have with Apogee?
Yeah, I mean, back in the 90s, it was a whole different world. We didn't have Kickstarters or Twitters or all these indie communities and everything. So now it's just, now it's just a whole different ballgame. So Kickstarter is obviously a place to look. Steam Early Access is a place to look. There's a lot of places. There's various Twitters that communities that where people are posting their indie games. So that's a place to look. And we super well networked, and we put the word out that we were restarting the company. We're looking for new games. A lot of our sort of industry friends sent us new games to look at, links and so on. So it's just a very different world now, and there's a lot more indies out there because we live in a world where you don't have to make your own engine every time like we did back in the 90s. The technology is kind of already there for you in a lot of ways, and there's lots of assets and code and modules that you can download. So and importing is a lot easier. We didn't import games back in the 90s because it was such a nightmare. Now with these engines and Unreal and Unity, especially, of course, it's almost free.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much effort to port a game. So it's just a whole different world now. But also another thing is that the reason we want to be an indie level publisher is because we feel like that's where so much of the innovation is happening in the industry. The big AAA guys, their projects for the most part cost so much money. They have to play it more safe. So you see all these indie games like No Man's Sky, Among Us, Minecraft going back a while back. There's just so many indie level projects is where a lot of this innovation is coming from. So that's the playground we want to be in. It's the one that we were part of back in the early Apogee days when we were finding companies like id Software and Remedy and the guys at Ascend and so on. So it's just the playground we want to be in because we feel like it's more exciting, it's more innovative, it's where the action's happening.
Awesome. And Mike, what was that moment like when Apogee first reached out to you and said that they were interested in Below the Stone? Like, was it?
Well, I'll tell you, David. They friggin' blocked me.
I blocked Scott. Yep, that's how it went. And like, we're not even kidding. We're not even joking around here. I blocked them. And because we were getting spammed by a bunch of publishers and that were all interested in Below the Stone. And what ended up happening was the difference between the rest of the publishers and Apogee was Apogee kept at it. They kept messaging us, and we kept blocking them. So we got a message on Discord from Scott and Terry of Apogee. I ended up blocking both of them because I was just assuming more publishers. I don't want to deal with this right now. We got to get back to what we're doing. We don't need.
I finally found you. I finally stalked you on Facebook, and that's when you finally started listening to me, and we finally were able to set up a call.
I was like, all right, Facebook is like the most obscure place. So if this guy found me on here, he must be serious. So that's kind of what happened. He contacted me on Facebook, and after being blocked various times, and I said, you know what? In my own head, I said, there's nothing to lose from just talking with him and seeing what would happen. And obviously, we're in this call now. So,
did you make the right decision, Mike? Did you make the right decision?
But you're putting me on the spot here, Scott. Yes, I definitely think we made the right decision.
Look, that kind of way of meeting is not uncommon. We've actually had an actor on this show before who admitted that they got a phone call from Quentin Tarantino and they thought it was a practical joke and hung up on him. So, yeah, it does happen. Well, guys,
Yeah.
Yeah.
We kind of went through the same thing. We kind of, there was like a phase where we kind of, I didn't even look into Apogee at first. I was just like, all right, I don't need another publisher messaging me right now. And then it went to the phase of, okay, this has to be a joke. It's Scott Miller, it's somebody, it has to be a fake. And then it went more into curiosity, like, all right, let's see where this goes. And obviously, what you see today.
Yeah, you mentioned before with the composer that it all came down to the fact that they were the person that basically asked about the game rather than rates or anything like that. For indie game makers and indie game developers out there, is that the same for how it works with with a publisher like Apogee? Like, do you talk to the person that's contacted you and find out how passionate they are about the game before you make any decisions at all?
Yeah, of course. I think it came down to it was you're always sort of playing a game when you're life is a lot like a game, and when you're talking with people, there's always this back and forth, right? And if there's something where you feel the other person is just kind of throwing a line and trying to fish and see what they catch, you're gonna sense it. But when it came to Apogee, it didn't feel like we were being fished. It felt like they were looking at Stone as, this is something that we want and we need for Apogee. So that's what drove us to be like, all right, let's talk about this. And really, that was the difference between all the other parts in Apogee.
Awesome. Well, guys, I know we are running out of time, so one quick question for both of you. First of all, for Mike, when can we expect to see Below the Stone be released, and on what platforms will it be released?
Yes, we are planning to release early access in quarter 2 or 3 of 2022. We have a Kickstarter that's supposed to launch in late August as a promise to our fans who were part of the first Kickstarter. We're trying to revive that, and we're going to see it succeed much better than the previous one and expand to a much larger audience this time. And with the help of Apogee, of course, we're also going to be porting to every major system. Of course, the Steam Deck, is it called? That came out yesterday, so we need to talk about that a little bit more. But yes, due to Apogee, we're talking about releasing every single major console.
Awesome. And for Scott, what now for Apogee? What can we expect in the future from the company now that it's been relaunched?
Well, we're going to be at PAX West. We have at least 2 more games we're going to announce before PAX West. And let's see. We're just going to keep pushing forward here. We've already got a pretty darn exciting lineup of games. We've announced, of course, Blow the Stone, Dead Fury, Residual. Like I said, we have 2 more coming in the next few weeks that we're going to be announcing. We hope to have a really good showing at PAX, meet a lot of press people like yourself. And we're also going to keep signing games. We plan on signing, probably 6 more games. Having around 10 to 12 games kind of always in production is about the level we want to hit. And so we're always on the lookout for outstanding games. And another part of ours that, like we tell all the teams, including Mike's team, we work with you on a game like Blow the Stone. We don't want this to be like a one-off, or in other words, a release and forget. We like the model of games now to where you release a game and you keep building on it. You keep building the community. You keep building new content for the game. So a game like Below the Stone, we see this as a 5-year project, really. Even so, when it's released, we're going to keep working on it because the community's there. If the level is there, we want to keep building this thing out, making it more exciting and supporting it, and kind of making it sort of an evergreen deal.
Definitely.
Yep.
Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been an absolute privilege chatting to both of you. So we want to wish you all the best of luck with the release of Below the Stone, and we can't wait to see what comes from Apogee next.
Thank you, Dave.
My pleasure. Thank you.